All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the return of the Psychedelic Trip Report series. We're back. It's been 2 years since I've uploaded a trip report like this, but yeah, I've been missing the trip report series. I feel like people want to watch them. They're definitely very related to the ideas and concepts we work with on this channel, and that was especially relevant because I just read all of them. I'm recording the intro after. I know, sue me. The original footage got corrupted, or audio. But yeah, here we are. I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long for new people to the channel who just clicked on the video. So welcome. All right, amazing air bulb invention. The dose is unknown, and freebase DMT was smoked. All of these trip reports are found on Arrowhead. It's a website. There should be links in the description down below. But yeah. About 2 months ago, I obtained 2 grams of DMT. I was elated after several years of searching for it. I had really wanted it in the first place, but had settled for various other diacyltryptamines over the past 3 years, which had brought me a wealth of interesting and amazing experiences. I tried a couple of moderately successful Yage journeys, which had shown me the potentials of the mind spaces available through DMT. But I have been perhaps a little cowardly about inflicting the physical effects of Yage on myself again, though I long to visit the mental territory again. The package arrived one sunny April morning when I had a day off. I loaded a joint with a small dose of the white freebase powder and sparked it. An immediate warm buzzing around my neck and shoulders followed the bite of the harsh smoke on my lungs, and my vision gently morphed with fine horizontal seams like a Venetian blind, each band tinting reality either red, green, or blue in alternating order. Intuitively, I felt a sense of potential power and significance, although as the experience quickly dissipated, I was strongly aware of the taste of plastic and protests of my long-suffering lungs. 5 minutes or so afterwards, an old friend from whom I had not heard for years phoned out of the blue to say they were moving abroad. I had heard talk about synchronicities on chatboards, etc. before, but I tend to the skeptic side on such matters. And my thoughts about why I have an interest in the matter of psychedelics, I take the view that you have to separate clearly in your mind the normal workday life of a 21st century Westerner and the dream world that psychedelics can reveal. I don't believe in ghosts and UFOs, etc. during normal life. I remain a little wary of those believers with a glint in their eye who abandon their lives completely to the pursuit of one conspiracy or another. But when I am under the influence of psychedelic drug at a sufficient dose, the dream state I occupy appears to have certain rules and parameters which are different to those of the lucid state. Whether or not the word real can be used in reference to a state where these different parameters apply is a moot point. When I am in such a state, I may as well interact with it, if only in the interest of knowledge or novelty. In the afternoon, I bought a glass pipe with a little side hole and some vials from the local head shop. With this new equipment, I determined to explore further. I put some dried tobacco in the body of the pipe, along with some spice, and held it over a candle to heat the pipe. I made several attempts like this with varying successes. I often complicated the liftoff by worrying about the safety of the candle flame. I found music distracting. A singer's voice would be morphed into a metallic jabbering. These first journeys were brief and hard to integrate. The rapidity of the visions was such that only the general tenor of the content was discernible. It seemed to have a sinister tone, consisting of images such as playing cards flashing by, skulls, military hardware, screws. At one point, a vicious gun turret on the back of a plane with jutting machine barrels. Just a quick image frame amongst many. The almost instant passing of this phase was followed by a warm, womb-like phase, where I did not have any Technicolor realist visions, just the warm reds of the bright ceiling light through my closed eyelids, across which seam-like waves folded and divided. I had experienced an almost identical state as this latter phase using 4-ACO-DMT, and felt very comfortable. In the subjective state, I often feel like I am in the presence of a benevolent God, to whom I feel it is only right to thank for all the good things in life, and to send out good wishes to all my loved ones. I then feel a little guilty and send out good wishes to all the people I don't love. Finally, I feel very virtuous all around. When back in the sober state, my skeptic brain has a good laugh at these religious epiphanies. This is what I like about psychedelics. They let me experiment with possibilities which in the real world are not possibilities. For example, the question, what might it be like to burst a sack full of dimensions on your head, is a subject of metaphysical speculation. But under the influence, and you might be lucky enough to participate in some kind of encounter where this actually appears to take place. I often found myself swaying gently with my arms folded and a warm smile over my face, almost bowing to the universe in satisfied bliss. I took one hit in the kitchen at the back of my house, overlooking our back garden, which has many pleasant trees, some still in blossom. The good sunshine that evening gave the foliage a translucent light. In the kitchen, I heated the pipe over the gas hob. The disadvantage of my method seemed to be that it led to quite some wastage. I needed to cover the side hole in the pipe to achieve a stronger negative pressure, which results in a more effective vaporization. However, the pipe was hot to touch, and so again, I was approaching the jump with a cluttered mind state. I managed 2 tokes, holding the last in, but not convinced of its adequacy. I kept my eyes open, holding steady on the kitchen units while seated on a tall stool. The surge began, and I watched the kitchen units dancing before my eyes, sliding along left to right in outline form, neon-colored reds, blues, and greens. I looked at the cooker whose control surface would duplicate along all the units, flickering back and forth. Then I looked at the microwave on the work surface, which was also indulging in these strange displays. Immediately, I beheld the sudden exchange of pulses or spurts of neon energy between it and the gas cooker. At this point, I had to laugh a little. I had a sense that this performance was for my benefit somehow. There had been some comedic element which had struck a chord in me and just seemed absolutely hilarious. I remember thinking that if my missus had walked in, I would have pointed at what I was witnessing and said, "Would you look at that?" quite unself-consciously, as though it was there to see plain as daylight. I began to surmise that my technique was probably flawed and wasteful. The pipe became quite grubby. I didn't want to wash away remnants of the previous burn, but I knew that the remnants would quickly degrade anyway, exposed to air. I was getting toward the end of my spice as well, so I made further dispatches to Arrakis, to whom the people of which culture I am eternally indebted. In the knowledge of almost certain replenishment, I decided to purchase a more effective pipe and make the best of what was left to me at that time. I found a light bulb style vaporizer, which matched the prescription perfectly at a penny under €5 from the head shop. Its ease of use has led me to imagine using it to try vaporizing some other tryptamines, all in salt form, such as 4-ACO-DMT and DPT. This vaporizer I tested in the kitchen over a hob. I was a little apprehensive because I had been chewing over the sinister tone some of the visions I had experienced. I wondered if that was the thin end of the wedge, and that by getting a really big chestful, I was only going to submerge deeper into something sinister that I did not want to see. I could not reconcile this fear with the wonderful, blissful sense of being I was experiencing in the afterglow. I wondered if it was some part of myself that I was genuinely scared to look at. The voice of logic reminded me that whatever happens is over almost as quickly as it begins, and that gave me a sense of strength going in. The heat melted the light yellow-tinted crystals into a colorless pool which gathered in the bottom of the bulb. I watched white vapor uncoiling around the glass as the bulb became opaque. I drew slowly one long, potent lungful, and as I did so, the vapor billowed more furiously. My tongue and lips numbed and my respiratory plumbing stung a little as I filled up. Eyes opened, I placed the still billowing bulb down on a cold hob and turned the heat off. As I did this, the room tinted yellow sepia, and I shut my eyes looking for a slideshow. I was immediately disappointed. Just the womb-like state with some extra patterning, but then the warm crescendo of buzzing, both audible and physical, spread throughout my neck and shoulders, followed by a very slight crack or snap from somewhere in my auditory canal. For a short while, I was not strictly local. I don't remember events as such, just a sensation of being somewhere in between my kitchen and the dream world. Then this absence of self was burst by a small patch of vivid vision. like the view through a tiny hole in the wall of a darkened room out to the scene on a bright summer day. I thought I saw a snippet of rows of parked cars, like the US guzzlers of the 50s with their chromed wings, or maybe it was an orderly residential scene. I gasped involuntarily, startled by the many implications of this vision. The stylistic appearance of the scenes were partly culturally familiar, and at the same time slightly skewed. I was startled out of phase with the vision, but I was exhilarated and back in the afterglow where I began giving praise to the universe for what I could only formulate as the privilege of what I had seen. The question of intentionality came up again in my mind. It felt like I had been shown these things by the big whatever. I gently swayed on the stool and basked in the beautiful concept that the universe was far more bizarre and comedic than I could have ever imagined. I had gasped at the ontological ramification that I might have seen another world or a parallel universe. I felt certain for a few moments inside that I had seen proof that worlds and culture, not particularly unlike our own, or sharing certain evolutionary or environmental parameter existed, and there might even be many of them. This was not the kind of revelation that transposes well into conversation, so I kept my counsel to myself. My missus does not approve of my little hobby very much, but for all the right reasons, because she cares about me, so I don't recite her my adventures. The general effect of all this DMT smoking has been strangely positive. I am conscious of the power of suggestion in potentially shaping the experiences we have. After all, I think it was Hume who surmised that we are the sum of our experiences. I felt almost virtuous not to have witnessed entities which could be described as self-transforming machine elves, though that is not to say I was in any position to doubt the subjective truth of these descriptions, but I had felt what seemed to be divine presence, and visualized abstract entities in the wide mind space of closed eyes with a strong light source. And I had witnessed something that had startled me to the core of my being in a deeply satisfying way, although I could not fathom its significance. It could have been many possible or impossible things, and called to mind a reality along the lines of Michael Moorcock's multiverse. I also noticed a sense of well-being in general life, which I have heard reported, and subsequently may be a result of preconditioning. However, this sense seems so tangible and yet natural as to be too good to be true. I found a part of me thinking that everyone should have a blast with this stuff at least once. A cliche, I know. I also imagined the possibility of a worldwide pyramid selling a scheme by which an alien race might prepare humanity for contact. This tickled me since in my newfound openness to the parameters of altered space, such a conspiracy might be impossible to disprove. I felt heightened empathy with even the people I perhaps disliked, and tangible antidepressant effect. Not that I am generally depressive these days, but there is something to this. I would only complain that my chest has been taking a beating. There's a strange logic that it appears that the more effective a hit I achieve, the less troublesome my chest is. I cough up some chunks in the aftermath, and the taste doesn't offend me anymore. My next assignment arrived a week after that final excursion. Excitement boiling over, I prepared myself for more adventures. I was faced with a dilemma. The experience, I felt honestly in my heart, was a good thing, as far as I could see. It seemed to open my mind on a spiritual level, which chimed morally with the parts of my Anglican upbringing, which I still respect, and the Buddhist ideas I had been reading about recently. It gave me exhilarating journeys and imaginings, which I somehow wished I could record or describe, and would be grist to any mind with a soft spot for science fiction. I also sensed somehow the experiences constituted a revealing or an uncovering, due to the perception of continuity between trips. Something might be captured in my memory in one experience, and in the next one, I might seek to hone in on that image, and it might blossom itself into many possibilities. It was an ongoing discourse between me and the drug. However, it's expensive to obtain and woefully illegal. I can't see how it can be legal like tobacco or beer, it's just too powerful. I was pretty scared by what seemed like hellish imagery in the early part of my experiences, and it almost seemed to be warning me off. I don't like to break the law, I only do so in relation to weed and my research. I don't speed, and I'm at peace with myself most of the time, morally. I had been reading about Alan Watts, a religious academic and Buddhist who at one point said, "When you have got the message, hang up the phone," in relation to psychedelics. I agreed with those words, but certain that I had not yet got the message, I certainly wanted to see more. With this in mind, I decided to explore the current 2 gram I had and order 5, which I would package and freeze with the other samples for some distant future time when I felt the urge. I had a hunch that this might be just a short window of availability and that the privilege of this opportunity might soon be gone. I had bought a gas turbo lighter to provide a safe but effective heat source. If, for whatever reason, you let go of it, it goes out, so that the possibility of dying from burns just as you are on the brink of universal knowledge is avoided. Furthermore, it starts a vaporization very quickly, and you can reduce the heat if your throat is hurting by increasing the flame distance. I got comfy on a very soft chair in my converted garage. I had strong spotlights on the ceiling pointed to my head. These help embolden the colors of the closed-eye visuals, giving garish hues to the visual field. I loaded a 100 milligram hit and started the flame, beginning to inhale slowly once the vapors rose. I must have managed a long, cool, slow breathful, because I was able to calmly hold it in for what seemed like a very long time. I was able to dispose of the bulb and lighter in a civilized fashion, and close my eyes expectantly. Myself was dissolved again, and after a short cavalcade of pageantry and carnival, of which I was no longer fearful. But I was again non-local or in dimensional interstices. To the right of my mind space was a blue mass, a large entity formed of layers of strata and bejeweled with many crystals along geometric fault lines, which folded, twisted, and morphed its form in a mechanical fashion, was alongside of me. The blue color was around the entity like an amniotic sac. I moved my mind towards it and I burst into the sac, which fell away enough for the entity and myself to make some kind of contact. It was a light green to yellow color underneath the sac, suspension of disbelief obligatory at this point. I sensed a blue sheen spreading over my own body, which was rigid but gently juddering with a fine tremor, similar to which I've experienced with DPT. I also became aware that I was pulsing and stretching rhythmically besides the fine tremor, matching the oscillations of the entity to my right. When I did it so in phase with it, the spaces between the strata of its twisting form widened, and the jewels inside showed even more vivid crystal surfaces. It was through these surfaces I again glimpsed the strange world which I had seen that previous time. The more my body matched the entity's dance, the greater one of these crystal windows became, filling my mind's eye and almost breaking through into the scene beheld. A sunny 1950s suburban street, somewhere far across the universe. This phase of physical movement and intense vision was accompanied by a strange sensation of flashes of sudden coldness, which intuition told me was something to do with interacting with the entity. Although I did not fear for my life or any extreme drama, it was enough to distract me, and the consciousness of my visitors diminished. I was still in the far-off state, and spent some time minutes swaying and basking in the moments of grace. My eyes remained closed, however, though I occasionally flashed a look at the room around, which neon sparks flitted. To integrate this experience, I resolved to wrap up warm for my next attempt, and to follow the dance of the entity if I dared. I had begun to entertain the possibility that the entity might in fact be using my curiosity to lure me into contact. There might be no doorways into other universes, just beings using extensive kitsch simulations of such worlds to lure psychonauts for their own mysterious ends. This might explain the slightly skewed stylistic tone of the visions. I also had to acknowledge there was an almost sexual angle to these encounters, a feature I had noted on several occasions when I had used heroic doses of 4-ACO-DMT. I also became aware about how much dancing and physical conditions play a part in the shamanic phenomena. Using what I had learned, I was able to reproduce a very similar experience. The dance lasted perhaps longer, and I persevered the cold spell so that I got a clearer view into the crystal that I locked onto. I noticed that all the other crystals feature a similar scene, which might have been slightly different, like cinema film stock. I couldn't tell since I could only look closely through one crystal at a time. The entity itself is hard to describe in great detail. It had something akin to an Inca or Aztec architectural influence, combined with the opulence of a wedding cake, except that it could rotate, twist, and shuffle like a Rubik cube. In this latter trip, I noticed a neon green amniotic sac along with the original blue one I was familiar with. I did not have a chance during the time available to explore the possibilities with that entity, though I sensed it was of a species with the first. As I returned to consensus reality, I sent my now habitual prayers out and wished all souls well. I decided to hang up the phone for a while until I had been able to record and describe some of what I had been able to experience. There was still much I wanted to try. I had still not gone for the infamous third toke. I had grudgingly come to understand the term self-transforming machine elves with greater intimacy, and I have been amazed by how this drug is so specific and unspecific at the same time, and how difficult the game of memory can be when the recollection of what occurred evaporates like a dream at awakening. Because of the similarity I have noticed between the post-breakthrough phase of DMT and my experience of a good dose of 4-ACO DMT, I am speculating about using the ACO ester as a springboard into the DMT space. I have not gone around to this yet, nor a journey which I am postulating using 5 grams 10-to-1 white cappy extract I have to permit oral ingestion. At the moment, I am happy to vaporize due to the compact timescale. I am not considering the nasal route or plugging since I have the freebase and both routes are reputedly unpleasant, although I am not too squeamish generally. This stuff is both humbling and exalting. It shows me how little I really know about the universe and reality, but gives a sense of joy at the small part I play in it. And it seems to do this with its tongue in its cheek, for which it seems a reassuring and hopeful thing to my mind. All the best, peace and love. Alright, that was the first DMT trip report. What did you guys think? I thought it was pretty interesting, like the themes that kept coming up. Seemed to be pretty traditional DMT trip report. Very, very expansive. But like the stuff about like the 1950s and like the military stuff, like that kind of made me wonder if the OP who wrote the trip report was having like memories of a past life or something. But I thought in terms of like describing what you're experiencing, this was a super interesting trip report, although it was more of like a phenomena kind of sense. And the OP does talk about like, you know, there's the DMT world, and then there's like the there's the real world with your job, and you got to be able to differentiate the two. So I thought it was fun. I liked it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. We have a few more DMT reports lined up, so don't leave the video just yet. The next one is titled "The People Behind the Curtain." The dose is unknown, and freebase DMT was smoked. Drifting deeply into this visual ebb and flow of the DMT, I just walked through the thin fabric of the visual fractal fantasy. It was like a gauze layer of the dream just separated and boom. It was like walking from a dark night into a brightly lit casino in Las Vegas. I felt like I had walked behind the scenes into a series of rooms. Everything was prime color, cranked up to its fullest potential. The images were clear, crisp, and vivid. Many times more vivid than the early pre-room images. There were 2 people, a man and a woman, or a girl and a boy. They appeared to me like simple balloon computer-generated images. As soon as I stepped back in the room, they glided up to me and spoke directly to me. They kept saying, "Welcome back," and words like, "The big winner! He has returned! Welcome to the end and the beginning! You are the one!" As I looked around the room, I felt the sense of some huge celebration upon my entry to this place. Bells were ringing, lights flashing. Fear began to rise in me as I felt the deep change in my world. The sprites began to lead me around the room, showing me how all my life they had been preparing me for this return. I was shown dozens of experiences simultaneously in my life that had led up to and been clues to this moment. I was shown in a flood and a onslaught of images, thoughts, situations, raw feelings that everything had been building to this moment, that this moment had been planned. They told me it was a gift, that I had been selected to be the one. I felt feelings of huge relief, excitement, and fear in the sprites. At this moment in the experience, I became afraid for my life. I felt that this gift would cost me my life. I did not want to be the one. The sprites felt this fear in me and began to hold my hands and arms, rushing me deeper into their world. I felt their fear, and I began to believe that I had stepped out of the dream, out of the drug, out of my body and mind, and into this super world. I began to believe in the transformation. As I walked deeper, I could see standing in the middle of the room, in the center of this place, an object similar to an hourglass. It was slowly turning over. I became aware that this vessel, as it tipped over, transferring its contents from the small red end to the larger blue end, was transforming me. I felt my humanity slip out as I was now filled with this new powerful light, a light of greater perception, of clarity. It felt like returning home. It felt familiar. It felt like I was waking up from a hollow, pale dream of reality. I felt God-like and omnipotent. I realized that the gift was not only a gift, but equally a death sentence for my physical body. I felt like I had been chosen to receive this, not out of benevolence, but out of a need to release this power and perception. There had to be the one, to relieve the others. There had to be the one who perceived completely. I felt like Christ at the moment of realization of godhood and the inevitable moment of his crucifixion. I also felt like all this knowledge and perception was far too large to be processed by my physical mind, and that death was the obvious transition. As this moment of realization hit me, I felt the sprites smile and step back. They told me I was the one, and this was real, and that it would never end. They said, "Do you not believe? Then see." At this moment, I sat up in the real world and opened my eyes. This moment, true panic set in. I was deeply hallucinating. The real world was being covered, transformed into a psychedelic kaleidoscope of energy. Every surface had something like movie film, one image after another lined up like film shown through an overhead projector. These were the prime images of our symbolic nature. Slowly rolling over every surface, like the sprites of the objects. I felt I was seeing time in a singularity. I felt like I was seeing the symbolic patterns like a second perception of true meaning. In the real room, there were two people sitting next to me. When I looked at them, I felt reassured momentarily. Then they exploded into dozens of two-dimensional layers of light, looking like computer-generated futuristic paintings. Wafer-thin halos created the shapes of my friends. Dave looked up at me and said, "Welcome back," causing me to panic. Because when he said welcome back, I did not think it was back to reality, but back into the fold of the super world I was in. Back as their chosen one or at least one amongst them. I perceived Dave and Poon as personal guides or guardians or gatekeepers there to welcome me into this new exalted state. That moment stripped me of my world, my truths leading me to believe that my hallucinations were truth. I once again had the crashing feeling of winning, of being chosen, being forced to receive this unwanted sentence of total vision. I had this crash as I could see once again the cause and effect of my being there and the price I would have to pay. I was the Bean King, and the price of my gift would be perceptual transcendence but physical death. At this time, I felt a collapsing feeling as I gave in to the experience, accepting my fate. I remember thinking that the hourglass had turned a little farther, and I was pouring out of this life into my new one. I said out loud, "I am dying." That I lost the support of my body, myself, my existence, and I began to drift. Dave then touched my leg. I remember being drawn back into my body and thinking, to hell with this, I am not going to die, not yet, and I felt the sprites smiling around me, looking at me. I felt the fear. I felt the exhilaration of my visions. I was back in the sprite's room. Even though this place was vibrant and psychedelic, it was within my ability to comprehend. The sprites began their pitch at me being a winner and the one. I felt they were taking me back down the hallway to open those iconic electric vision into my death. I then said out loud again, "I am dying," to which Dave responded, "Only 3 more minutes and you will be alright." 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes was like a life raft that I sailed out of that world. As soon as I was able to believe that in 3 more minutes I would be normal again and everything began to fade, I felt in control of my body and my life. Slowly I drifted out of their world, back through the gauzy world of colors and patterns. With a little extra coaxing from my friends, I was able to wake up and separate myself from that moment. I still vibrate from the experience. I am very grateful to have been with my friends. This one was really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please pay homage to the Bean King. The Bean King, perceptual transcendence at the cost of physical death. Dave and Poon. Gotta love Dave and Poon. Two best friends. I didn't realize that Dave was like not a DMT entity at first, and I thought the author was, or the OP was just calling one of the DMT or the sprites. I guess they call them sprites. Just calling one of the sprites Dave. That was kind of funny. It definitely caught me off guard. This one's super crazy. Definitely a very esoteric trip. I'm glad it didn't drive the OP insane. I can definitely see what elements here were kind of scary. But there's also like the ecstasy of realization that you're God too. That's very very also all comes hand in hand with the fear you feel. So this was a pretty great DMT trip report, like colorful, kind of like it not only explains to the best of the author's ability what they're experiencing and seeing and what their intuition's telling them about this world they're being transported to, but also like the emotional roller coaster. Those are really the ingredients I enjoy in a good DMT trip report. But moving on, we have up next Homecoming Raised to the DMT Power. Smoked an unknown amount of DMT and cannabis. This one looks a little crazy, so let's tune in. I consider myself an intrepid but cautious and scientific psychonaut, taking low doses at first and gently exploring my way into higher doses of LSD, psilocybin, salvia, 2CB, and ecstasy / whatever MD compound and or miscellaneous uppers those pills might have been. If I had to estimate, I would say I've taken psychedelics on between 20 to 40 occasions in the past 10 years and never had a bad trip. Having recently helped my friend Freddie extract and purify DMT from a botanical source, I found myself in a position to experiment after 5+ years of reading and preparing my psyche to do DMT. I took multiple threshold doses to familiarize my body with the physiological effects of the chemical. I also took 2 larger doses, one with a sitter which was satisfactory, but alien, and one alone which caused a bit of panic. I decided I would smoke DMT alone this night, again, even though the last time I used it alone was a mildly frightening but completely satisfying experience. This is only the 3rd time I have taken DMT above a threshold dose. I prepared my launch pad. Lighting. It is dark outside, so there will be no natural light on this trip. Primary lighting is from my 55-gal turtle tank with a 48-inch black light, providing supplemental lighting in a corner of the room. I also allowed full incandescent light in the hallway leading to the bathroom in my bedroom, which bled out considerably to my launch pad. Seating. I placed my beanbag full of memory foam in front of the turtle tank, knowing that my eyes, if I open them, will be drawn to the primary light source anyway. I also spent a good 5 minutes imprinting a comfortable butt print into the bag to eliminate the need to resituate myself while riding the chemical rocket ship that I will soon prepare. In the relaxed, ride-it-out position, my eyes are level with the bottom of the tank, and the water's surface is roughly 20 inches above them. Sound. Having had a frightening but wonderfully comforting DMT experience involving a very familiar movie, I elected to forgo any recognizable outside audio. The only thing to be heard was the sound of the turtle tank's gentle waterfall and the occasional car outside. Dose prep. I wound a thin strip of day-glow orange duct tape around the stem of my favorite cheap bubbler to remind me that I would now contain DMT residue forevermore. Into the bowl, I placed a wire screen and added an amount of cannabis I could easily smoke and would probably be dissatisfied with in one hit. From my supply of DMT, which is so close to white you hardly notice it isn't, I raked out a loose pile about the size of a dime. That is to say, all the DMT I put in the pipe this night would have fit inside an American dime. I then added about the same amount of ganja as went on the screen and compressed the mixture lightly. One more pinch of cannabis and more light pressure completed the preparation of my chemical rocket ship. By eyeball, I could easily smoke this amount of just cannabis in 3 hits or less. Regretfully, I do not have a .001 gram scale, so I can only estimate the empirical weight of this dose by comparing it visually to a weighable supply. I estimate very approximately that I used at most 25 milligrams. Companion. Only my red-eared slider turtle will remain in normal space to watch my physical body, which I will soon be unconcerned with. His name is Hiram, and I have known him for 3 years. I found him at a pet store when he was an inch too small to be legally sold in America, and all the other turtles picked on him. I felt sorry for him, but they wouldn't sell him to me, so I bribed an employee to list him on the dead animals write-off sheet and give him to me. I know he's only a reptile, but he does recognize me as opposed to someone who doesn't regularly give him food, and sometimes I swear he knows and is thankful that I saved him from all those big mean guys at the pet store. I take care of him, and he takes care of me. Mental state. Prior to dose. I am apprehensive. This is to be my first solitary dose since what I call my frantic gathering and retreat trip. 2 things calm my mind. Hiram will be watching me this time, and I am taking an equivalent volume, not weight probably, of a much purer product. I reclined comfortably on my bag, holding my bubbler and clearing my mind. Breathing deeply, I recalled the pure childlike joy I felt last time I did this when I realized I had survived. I am excited to catch another glimpse of the entities that looked directly at me 2 days ago and decided I wasn't ready to be spoken to. I am fearful of underestimating my dose, whether by purity, weight, or residue left in the bubbler from earlier DMT uses. Breathing all these fears and expectations out as a putrid chartreuse vapor with a final deep breath, I strike my lighter and begin to inhale. Dosing. I light 1/3 of the bowl's surface quickly and pull gently to allow the heat in the bowl to vaporize the DMT as opposed to the heat from the lighter. By the time my lungs were full the first time, the cherry had traveled across the bowl in an odd way. I attribute this to the fact that the bowl was actually a parfait of different substances with different combustion temperatures. I hold this first hit for a long time. It's the classic tryptamine taste, which is like nothing else. To me, it tastes and smells like fresh aquarium tubing. That is just a reference point for my brainwaves. By the time I exhaled, I was beginning to feel a buzzing around the bridge of my nose and my sinuses. Knowing I was coming up already, I strove to smoke as much as I could. I was considerably more aggressive with the lighter on the second hit, and probably more aggressive with my inhalation. Fear took over again at this point as I thought, what have I done to myself? And I exhaled much sooner than I could have. Looking at the bowl, I realized that it looked only about half smoked. I may or may not have hit it a third time in a half-hearted way. I remember leaning forward to set the bubbler in a safe place, and as I leaned back to settle into my beanbag, the universe dissolved into everythingness. Phrase taken directly from my notes, and this is still the best way I can describe it. Coming up. Coming up on DMT is powerful and terrifying for me. My first cue that something is different is a buzzing that I feel in the middle of my face and a taste of DMT that is not quite taste. I'm pretty sure I would taste it even if it was injected. Then the mucous membranes in my mouth and throat make themselves known to me. The best way I can describe it is that I can feel diamond-shaped crystals 1 centimeter across forming and dissolving all over anything in my head that touches saliva. This is intensely pleasurable in an odd, alien sort of way. Again, I think, what have I done to myself? And breathe deeply once or twice. The feeling of air filling my lungs, they really are just 2 spongy balloons, I marvel to myself, is spectacular, and reminds me that I am still alive. I imagine that what I am experiencing now is the psychic equivalent of what astronauts experience during liftoff. The sounds that break my concentration on my body are distorted, as though the sound waves were electronically stretched into infinity. I am mildly aware of my surroundings as I set my bubbler down. The turtle tank and stand is in front of me, black light to my left, and hallway to my right, and suddenly all of that disappears. Perhaps I closed my eyes, but I do not remember doing so. Peak. I find myself looking down from the great height on a house at night. I hear music. It sounds and feels and smells and tastes like Howard Shore's Shire theme from Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, but infinitely more complex. I have come to realize that hear is not the proper verb here. Perhaps experience is better, as I was aware that my physical ears had nothing to do with this music. As soon as I become aware of this music, and even while I am still making the Lord of the Rings and non-heard connections, my perspective begins to change as though I were falling, though I feel no sensation of free fall. Soon, I find myself looking at the house I grew up in from a vantage point of 10 feet from the property line and 15 feet up. The music swells to a dynamic peak and I think, I'm home! I feel a sense of homecoming like nothing I've ever felt before, like when you return to a beloved childhood haunt years after your last visit, but magnified 10 times. Even though it is a night in this vision, the entire landscape is colored in reds, greens, and golds, the same colors that I see when I close my eyes and press on them. I become aware of the turtle tank in front of me and watch Haram dive from the surface 30 degrees to my right, all the way to eye level directly in front of me. I am comforted by the fact that Haram is looking right at me, though I can't decide if his tank looks like it is made of fractals or is an impressionistic painting. Whether fractals or Manette, I decided it is among the top 5 most beautiful sights I have ever seen. Nothing else in my relatively well-lit surroundings enters my awareness. Suddenly, I am viewing the same scene in my childhood home again. It looks like a photograph except for the red, green, and gold color palette. I begin to realize that something is off about this image. Nothing specific, just a sense that I am seeing an imperfect image. I came to realize days later that it was though every angle was perfect in the 3 dimensions that we normally see, but 90 degrees off in a dimension we don't. Carl H. Claudy's The Land of No Shadow from 1933 and Esquire's Flatland from 1884 really shaped this viewpoint. Read them if you really want to understand what I mean. Coming down. Again, I become aware of the turtle tank and again view the exact same image of Haram diving from the surface 30 degrees right to eye level directly in front of me. I feel a powerful deja vu, and then the realization that this must be a shadow of the cycles that my brother Franklin experiences while on DMT. I know that my eyes are open because I am seeing Haram, but investigations reveal that sober eyes can see much more of my apartment under identical lighting conditions. I can only conclude that the DMT caused a tunnel vision effect, lending support to the hypothesis that endogenous produced in the body DMT plays a role in near-death experiences. At this point, the image of Hiram was overlaid with my childhood home. As the internal music swelled to another dynamic peak, I could see both places at the same time, but only for a split second. In that moment, I felt as though I was looking in all directions at once. In front of me was the turtle tank home image, all other directions left, right, behind, up, down, forward in time, backward in time, and a host of others I understood then, but not anymore, appear to be dark and sinister, but not frightening tunnels crafted of incomprehensible red and gold calculus equations stretching into infinity. My vision shifted briefly to a view of myself in the turtle tank from the same perspective I had seen my childhood home, behind and above my body. I felt, saw, heard, tasted myself, and everything else in my apartment as it fell from the sky and into its proper place. Specifically, I remember watching my refrigerator and dishwasher fall from a great height, gradually changing from spinning calculus equations to mundane appliances. The walls behind the turtle tank and to the left, which a sober eye can see in perfect detail, become apparent to me for the first time since I dosed as greenish, again the same green my inner eyes see when I push my closed eyes, suggestions of walls. I am beginning to realize that I am right where I left myself, but I'm not really aware of my body, except that breathing still feels great. I watch Hira make a third identical dive to check on me and thank him for watching my body. Turning my head for the first time since I dosed, I catch a glimpse of the certificate I have mounted on my wall. My rational mind knows that it is just a piece of paper, which gives me the legal right to perform weddings and such, but my chemically altered mind sees a presence within it. I experienced a moment of greeting and farewell. Hello, we're so glad you're here, and you found me us, and aren't scared this time. I were right here the whole time, right where we have always been. Please come back and see me again sometime. The emotion, and I use the word emotion very loosely, I feel from this entity at this moment is similar to the thrill and joy I felt as a child when I was found while playing hide and seek. Returning to baseline. Filling my lungs continues to be a wonderful sensation. It reminds me that I survived and that feels great. I am close enough to reality now that I can see my apartment again. The colors are nearly normal, except for the suggestions of red, green, and gold calculus equations swimming on all the surfaces. I can concentrate on one object and view it as normal, but everything else swims with calculus. This is rather enjoyable, and I grew for a while on the mild visuals that are somehow more real than LSD or mushroom visuals before I realized something. I was back home. But hadn't I just been home? How could I be home from home? This was mildly confusing until my brain put it together this way the next day. I was back home from home, and yet I had never physically left my home. I wandered around my apartment for a few minutes, looking at things, touching things, experiencing the real world again. Everything seemed amazing and new, though it was the same old mess I left less than half an hour ago. Eventually, I was seized by a desire to write and grab my notebook to record the outline that would eventually become this experience report. In retrospect, I probably wasted a good portion of my After Effects by attempting to document too soon, but this is okay because I felt my memory of the early experience slipping away. Notes. I have tried to put this experience into some sort of chronological order to make it easy to read. In reality, this is a distortion of the experience, as I had no sense of time as it was going on. In fact, everything from the end of the coming up section to the end of the coming down section should be considered to have happened all at the same time. It is only through several weeks of thinking and analysis of the cycles I seem to experience that I was able to approximate a timeline for this. Truthfully, the experiences was not nearly so linear as this report makes it out to be. Even though I survived this experience without lasting damage, I do not recommend smoking DMT alone. My brother Franklin has this to say about the solo DMT experience. I worry about my physical body too much to do DMT without somebody watching it. It feels as though my body pulls my awareness back from hyperspace to check on it if I know it is alone. I wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment. An aquatic reptile is not a responsible substitute for a human guide. I relived this experience often in the weeks that followed. Looking at microorganisms in fresh pond water under a microscope nearly caused an embarrassing flashback, and I know I heard the music many times. In the end, it took me nearly a week to shake off the schizophrenic feeling of existing in two worlds at the same time. Final thoughts. For me, DMT is incredibly rough coming up, but ridiculously gentle coming down. Imagine what an ant might feel if taken by a scientist and launched into the sky in a model rocket, to be returned safely on a parachute to the exact point where she left her anthill. Her world and all her reference points are momentarily destroyed, only to find herself in the same place half an hour later. Translate this into psychedelic terms, and you will begin to understand the DMT experience as I experience it. I shift between past and present tense often. I feel like it shows how much of this experience is direct memory, present tense, versus memories that I seem to recall, past tense, while documenting after the experience. I find it an interesting literary device, but it's against the rules of coherent writing. Alright, that is the end of the video, kind of. Let's talk about the last trip report a little bit. The turtle, Hiram, amazing. Love the lore and the backstory, and using an animal to ground you, or working with an animal to like ground your body while you're out of your body on like a psychedelic experience. I thought the bit with his brother telling him that like if you're alone, you'll like astral travel like back to your body when you should be, you know, using your DMT trip to explore hyperspace. So like having a human guide is listed as helpful, or like someone to like be in the world while you're in the DMT world. So that's interesting to note. I don't know. I'm still kind of not an expert with the DMT trip reports here. It's been a while since it's been 2 years since I've uploaded in the series, so but it doesn't seem like this experience or the OP had any encounters with like entities or anything. There was the so it seemed more like a waiting room experience, if you're familiar with that term, where it's just a lot of the geometry and the colors. It seemed more of like it didn't seem like the heavier, higher dose breakthrough experiences like the last trip kind of explored. You know, leaving your body versus like seeing, you know, the red gold calculus, as the OP describes, kind of like all over your like your walls and like the real physical world. Is definitely like lower dose vibes. You're not like out of your body, and talking to machine elves. But there is the bit where they do see an entity. So maybe I'm kind of just like talking, you know, out of my ass a little bit. But what is it called? Like they do see like an entity in their certificate. Like there's like a certificate on their wall, if you guys remember that, and they see an entity, and they're like playing, like it gives them like the OP the feeling of like hide and seek. So that might speak to like the DMT experience being something where, you know, entities are right there, or I guess it speaks to, you know, someone interested in like general occultism so much, the concept of like the veil of forgetfulness, and the DMT experience is a way of just like ripping that off. So, you know, the entities talking to you through the certificate on your wall is, you know, kind of what you know, the interdimensional hyperspace manifesting into the veil of the material world, right, might manifest as. And I think these things are super interesting because they kind of just shed so much light on, I would say, schizophrenic experiences, or like on the less scary side, shamanic experiences. So it's kind of just painting like a clear picture of the phenomena that you kind of encounter when you start exploring these worlds, and the, you know, especially from the tryptamine experiences. So, but yeah, I feel like I learned something reading this. I hope you guys did too. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, comment, subscribe. Tell me something you liked about the video. Trying to get the channel going again. Trying to push this out. But yeah, hope everyone enjoyed. I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.